It says, it says that I'm live. Hello there, everybody. My name is Doug Allan. I'm a wildlife filmmaker, documentary cameraman, writer, presenter, speaker, what have you. Anyway, I am here on Lizzie Daly's live lessons, and I'm going to talk to you for 20 minutes or so about encounters with whales. Because I've been very lucky in my 35-year filming career, I have swum with a great number of whales, and they've all been extremely exciting. So why do I like whales? Well, whales, you see, whales are mammals. Whales are like dogs, cats, cows, like us. We are mammals. And so that means that every whale that you meet has its own personality. Now, sometimes the personality can run within the kind of whales, but sometimes, you get individual whales with individual personalities, and some days they'll be approachable, other days, well, they might like to be left on their own. And blue whales, for example, now they're the biggest of the whales, but actually they're very, very hard to spend any time with because they're usually on the go, they're diving quite deep, they're not really interested in human beings. So, blue whales, fantastic, a good pick, let's say, to do, to say that you've dived with the biggest animal that there's ever been, but they're not the most exciting of whales to actually be with. Now, whales are big, that's the first thing you notice about whales. So just to give you an idea of how big, let me show you and how exciting they are to swim with. Let me just show you this little bit of video, see if I can and bring it up close and then run it for you. So let's see if I can bring this up. Humpback whales just look utterly amazing when you get close to them. They've got all these bumps over their head. You swim in and that eye just comes straight in and you establish an utterly personal one-to-one contact with them through their eye. And as you hang at the surface or swim down to them, they will come up and meet you. They come up and meet you. They're full of curiosity. They're full of friendliness. There is just nothing like an intimate encounter with a humpback whale in good visibility. Pretty exciting, isn't it? So I was saying how big whales are. Well, look, have a look at this. Now, if I hold this up, okay, now, anybody out there, if you stand up and put your hand in the middle of the small of your back, you can feel your backbone. And in between all the bones of your backbone, there is this disc of cartilage that basically stops your vertebrae rubbing together. Well, that is the intervertebral disc of humpback whale. Now, your intervertebral discs are probably about that sort of size, and this is the intervertebral disc of whale. So there you are. That gives you a little bit of an idea of how big whales can be. But like I say, they've all got their own character. And I remember when I started, one of my earliest assignments was to go down to Patagonia, sort of almost at the bottom of South America, and to do a sequence on the southern right whales, which are down there. So the director, producer, he really wanted a sequence of them mating, if he could. And I was lucky. I had one day where I could see a male was getting very interested in the female, and then he began to mate with her. So I slipped into the water, and I went fairly close because the visibility wasn't all that good. But I got some really nice shots of the male, the female swimming past, and the male was underneath, and you could see his willy coming out, and it was really very, very exciting. So I wanted some shots from down low. I wanted to get the whales swimming over the top of me so that I got a kind of silhouette shot. So I went down. I was maybe about 7 or 8 meters down underwater, looking up, and suddenly I was aware of this huge sort of shape coming towards me. And this big whale came in, and it was maybe about a metre above the bottom, and it came in and it just stopped. And it was in front of me, and it was like this big wall of whale was all in front of me. And the eye was just level with me. It was about the size of a grapefruit, and I could see it moving in its socket and looking at me and looking up and down. And I put my hand up, and as I moved my hand, you could see her eyeball moving. And there was a little bit of a swell in the water moving me back and forward. And it just began to push me against the whale. And I had to put my hands up like this just to stop myself actually, touching the whale. But of course, when I put my hands up, I did touch the whale. But, you could feel this whale sort of react. It didn't flinch, but you could feel the muscle tone change in this big animal's head. And I looked, and I could see little flecks of skin coming off it, because these whales, they molt all the time. The outer layer of their skin, peels off. And I don't know why, but I just thought, if I start scratching this whale, it's going to really enjoy it. So I slowly started rubbing this side of this whale's head, and I rubbed it for a few seconds, and then I stopped. And you know how if you rub a dog between the ears, give them a bit of a scratch, they often like it, and they push their head up, hard against your hand to get more of a scratch. Well, that whale was just the same. The whale sort of leaned into me and wanted me to rub it. So I started rubbing its head, and I worked away along its head, and I got to its rostrum, its nose, and I was up there, and then I thought, I better go to the surface, because the boatman up on top is probably wondering where I am. So I swam up towards the surface, and as I got to the surface, I just had time to say to the boatman, "Yeah, hi, I'm fine, I've got a really friendly whale here." And the whale came up beside me, and it put its rostrum right on my chest, and it began to push me through the water. And for a couple of minutes or so, there I was, the whale's rostrum on here, pushing me through the water, and I've got both my hands down the side of its head like this, rubbing and scratching and itching its face and all the rest of it. And it pushed me around for about 10 minutes or so, and then it backed off, and I was able to swim to the boat. But that was my first experience of whales, and what an amazing, magical experience it was. It was just absolutely fantastic. So southern right whales are not at all like blue whales. Blue whales swim past, southern right whales will come and they'll look at you. But the best whale for spending some time with, the best whale are these guys, humpbacks. Now there's a humpback, I took that picture. Now humpbacks are you often see them, and the good thing about them is they're quite friendly. They spend a lot of time at the surface, doing things, waving those big pectoral fins, for example. You'll see how long the pectoral fins are on that whale. This is the pec fins here. Now, if you see any of those pec fins, those big scalloped black and white fin, whitey shaped fins, coming out of the water, has to be a humpback. No other humpback has these long scallop-edged pectoral flukes. And the other good thing, of course, with humpbacks, in fact, all whales, but humpbacks in particular, when they dive and they throw their flukes up into the air, if you see the underside of their flukes, then you'll see that there are black and white spots on those. Well, they're often white with black patches, or black with white patches underneath. Well, the patches, the patch pattern underneath the tail fluke is absolutely unique to that whale. So if you can get lots of pictures of different tail flukes, then you can actually identify those whales if you take a photograph of them somewhere else. And that's how some scientists have got a handle on where whales migrate to, because whales often spend part of the year in one place and another part of the year hundreds of miles away somewhere else. And they have done matching up of fluke pictures so that they can tell, oh, look, we're seeing a whale here, and we can positively identify it as the same whale that we saw somewhere else. But when you're swimming with them, the good thing is that if you find a friendly whale and you can get a look, get a good picture of the underside of that fluke, then you can actually go looking for that same whale, possibly in the same place or around the same island. And if you see that whale, then you know that it's a friendly whale. So this one here was a particularly friendly whale that we had in Tonga. And it wasn't every time, but sometimes we could go and go to this bay, and if she was there, well, you know, I just knew that I was going to have a great time with her, because she was... Whales are divided into two kinds of whales. You might think that whales like blue whales are very different from, say, whales like dolphins, like Free Willy. But actually they're the same. You can call them all whales. The big difference is that some whales have got teeth and other whales feed with what we call baleen. Now, the blue whales, the humpback, the right whales that I've mentioned already, those are all baleen whales. Now, baleen whales feed usually on small animals, although sometimes they can feed on small fish. But they have this feeding apparatus called baleen in their jaws. Now, the easiest way to imagine baleen is, imagine a toothbrush. Okay, here's what, you don't have to imagine a toothbrush. This is a toothbrush. So in the upper jaw of a baleen whale, you have like a toothbrush that's coming down from your upper jaw instead of teeth. And the baleen plates, like the bristles, they hang down from the upper jaw. And it means that when the whale slowly swims through the water with its mouth open, the baleen plates are hanging down the side of the mouth. The water comes in the mouth, along with the plankton or the fish or things. It gets drawn into the mouth, and then the tongue comes up, and the water gets pushed out through the baleen plates, through the bristles. The water gets pushed out. But the bristles trap the little bits of food that are on them. So baleen can be very fine, like with a right whale. They have very fine baleen. They can feed on plankton, which is almost so small as you can barely see it, microscopic plankton. Humpback whale is a bit more coarse, the baleen, and they can feed on fish. They can feed on shrimps, you know, things like that. And I've actually got some pieces of baleen here to show you. So, look, these are plates of baleen from a humpback whale. I found this when I was doing a programme in Orkney with Chris Packham and Andy Torvat last year. So this baleen, you can see how big it is. Let me go further back. You can see how this baleen, you know, is like this, and it hangs down again from the upper jaw, and you see this feathery end to it, this feathery edge. Well, that's what does all the sieving, all the filtering out of the water. So the water gets pushed from this side through the baleen, and it gets trapped on the feathery bits of the baleen, and then the whale licks it off. So again, you can see how big this stuff is. Well, if you go to a bowhead whale, which is an Arctic whale, the baleen in a bowhead whale got to be 3 meters long. So in other words, when that bowhead whale was swimming through the water with its mouth open, the front of its mouth was probably, you know, this wide, and it was 3 meters high with the baleen going past. So you can imagine how much water that bowhead was feeding. Bowheads are quite big whales. They weren't as long as blue whales, because blue whales are the biggest, heaviest animals that have ever lived on the planet. The biggest blue whale that was ever caught was almost 100 feet long, almost 30 meters long, and it weighed about 190 tons. Now that's heavier than any dinosaur or anything like that. So we are still living in an age when the biggest animal that ever lived is still alive on the planet. Now, bowhead whales didn't grow quite so big. The thing with bowhead whales is that they grew for a very, very long time. Bowheads were probably the oldest living animals on the planet. They think that bowheads could live up to 250 years old. Can you imagine an animal 250 years old that swims around the Arctic? Can you imagine how much sort of wisdom and knowledge that that whale must have accumulated in its life. Because the whales are quite intelligent animals, and I just find it amazing that a mammal so old, could still be alive. And the interesting thing is, how they found out? They found out the first indication of how old bowheads could be was that bowheads are still hunted by the Inuit, by the native people up in the Arctic. They're allowed to take 15 or 20 bowheads every year. And a few years ago, they caught this bowhead and they brought it ashore and they were cutting it up, to take all the meat to the village and things like that. And they discovered a very old, unusual harpoon head in it. And the native elders, they looked at it and they said, we haven't seen a harpoon head like that for years. So they took this harpoon head and they took it to the museum, and they found out that that kind of harpoon head had not been used for over 150 years. And that was so at some point already, someone had tried to harpoon it unsuccessfully and it had lived all that time beyond it. So that was the first indication that the bowhead whales could be that old. And I find that just amazing. I also find it sad, mind you, that they still hunt bowhead whales. I don't think that sort of cultural stuff is really all that necessary these days. But on the other hand, they're taking 20 whales a year from a population of probably 10,000, 12,000. So they're not endangering the numbers of the bowheads anymore. So you've got your baleen whales, and then you've got your toothed whales. And your toothed whales are all the things like dolphins. I'm just going to see how I'm doing for time. Yeah, they're all the things called dolphins. The biggest toothed whale is the sperm whale. And here's another thing I've got. Look, there's a sperm whale tooth. Now that came out of a dead sperm whale, which was down in the Falklands. And again, you can see how much bigger it is, than my mouth. Now the toothed whales do an amazing range of behaviour. I've seen them flapping their tails, killer whales flapping their tails to make a wave to wash seals off ice floes. I've also been in the water with belugas. If I show you what belugas are these wonderful white whales that you get in the Arctic. You only get them in the Arctic. And the thing about belugas when they come close is that they make this amazing whistling, chirping sound, which is just from belugas are these white whales, like I say, and when they get close to you in the water, that's me with the belugas, and that's the noise that they're making. It's just like being in the middle of a flock of birds when you're underwater. You can hear them chirping and whistling away and tweeting to you. They're just fantastic. And, we've got no idea what they're actually saying to each other. We know that some of the very high-pitched sounds can go out and they bounce off objects, and kind of like a bat gives out very high-pitched frequencies that come back, and the bat can tell, what's in front of it, which is why it can fly in complete darkness. Well, these belugas give off the same sort of high-pitched sounds, and it's possible that they can find holes in the ice. They often dive under very thick ice, where there aren't very many places where they can surface to breathe. So it might be that they can, using those ultrasonic sounds, they can find that. They might be able to find schools of fish, far much further away than they can see underwater. They're able to catch the echoes coming back. So I've almost used up my 20 minutes. It's amazing how fast it goes, isn't it? But I just wanted to say one thing, about hunting whales. Now, there is a lot of hunting and capture of dolphins to go in aquaria and places like that. And I think that's a very bad thing. We know that these whales are really, really intelligent, really sociable. They need the richness of life in the sea. There's no way in an aquarium or some sort of enclosed space that a dolphin can have as exciting. So they should, we shouldn't be catching them for aquarium. And we shouldn't be, I've heard my connection's unstable. Oh, there we go, maybe that's better. And we shouldn't be hunting whales for food. The Japanese have just said they've decided there's enough whales in the ocean, so they're going to start hunting them again. But I don't think they should, and I'll show you why. Last thing to show you Look, when they go hunting whales, this is what they fire at the whale. This thing is at the end of a big metal lance. It goes inside the whale. There are explosive charges inside this, and it explodes inside the whale and effectively kills it like a grenade. Totally cruel, totally unnecessary, totally should be stopped. Totally should be stopped. That, unfortunately, is like me. So I can see I've got a number of questions. What's my favourite whale and why? Well, I think it would be humpback whales, really, because they're the most exciting ones. Humpback whales have recovered in recent years. The most endangered whale today, well, there are some small dolphins that live in the rivers, which are probably, to be honest, gone extinct. It's maybe 4 or 5 years since the last one was seen. So unfortunately, fishing pressures, pollution, stuff like that has probably pushed these whales over the edge, and they've disappeared. In terms of the big whales, the smallest number of big whales, probably the northern right whale, which exists up in the North Atlantic. There's only a few hundred of those because they get endangered because they often get hit by ships and things like that. So that's probably the most endangered big whale that there is. I'm just seeing what else is there. It's good to know you've never lived with a whale either, Steve. Well, that's for somebody else. I'm not sure how to score. Wait a minute. A question from Molly on Instagram. Why do sperm whales sleep hanging upright? Well, sperm whales have got a lot of oil in their big oily head. And one of the theories is that they can, by pumping blood around the oil in their head or around the reservoir where they keep the oil, they can make the oil warmer or colder. So they can actually change the density of their head. So it may be that whales, are at their most, sperm whales are at their most comfortable where they just make their head that little bit more buoyant than the rest of their body, and that's maybe why they hang upright when they're sleeping. But to be honest, I'm not sure. Maybe in a few years' time, because sperm whales, make clicks and grunts and things, maybe in a few years' time, when we can speak to sperm whales, maybe we'll be able to speak to them and ask them why they hang upright in the water. But that's a great question. That's a great question. What else is there saying? Favourite whales? I think that's it. That's all we've got at the moment. Anyway, if you enjoyed it, then write into Lizzie. Come and listen to the other live lessons, but write into Lizzie, say you enjoyed it, and I'll be very happy to come back some other time. Okay, guys, thanks a lot for listening. This has been Doug Allan and his encounters with whales, saying cheerio for now. Bye.